All right. Also, we just started talking about the idea of the expansion of science, really the victory of the material world, the idea that the universe is knowable, the universe is in some ways even fixable, and we're now going to see the applications of this. The first thing is the second industrial revolution, something that Dr. McKay does a little bit later, but he mentions it here. The second industrial revolution begins in 1871 for us. And this is really the moment in which the age of progress absolutely goes in. All of the 19th century scientific advances developed a new wave of industrialization that really expanded consumerism. Sometimes we call this the consumer revolution. And this is where we begin to see the betterment of people's lives. Electricity and petroleum powered new inventions like electric trains, automobiles, airplanes, bicycles, and even things like the radio inside the house. So now we begin to see heavy industry and light industry, consumer goods, being greatly impacted, and we begin to see the development of mass production. Mass production, and here we see a photograph of a assembly line that is developed during this time period. You see that's the most likely the Model T. And now the assembly line allows for the first time true mass production. Rather than artisans working on individual products, now all of a sudden the assembly line and other forms of production really leads us to this mass production where you have a huge amount of consumer goods being produced, which then creates mass culture. Mass culture is a term in which means people of all social classes are able to participate in the new culture, the new material culture. They're able to enjoy from the lowest to the highest classes. They're able to enjoy things like movies, radio. They're able to enjoy periodicals such as magazines, automobiles. They're able to enjoy a betterment in life. So really, this is really what lays us into that real progress. And Dr. McKay identifies three significant consequences of this. First, the everyday experience and innumerable newspaper articles impress the importance of science on the popular mind. You need to make sure you understand that. What that means is even the uneducated understood the importance of science. They were able to read, like in today's world, if you're interested, you can read things like Popular Mechanic, where it gives you an insight of, in your common day vernacular, understanding, which really adds value to the scientist. The philosophical implications of science saw a displacement of religious perspectives in favor for materialism. This is not shocking, as we've already talked a little bit about the feminization of religion. Men feel like they have better knowledge, better understanding. They're able to progress past religion. That's a really important concept that we're going to talk about a little bit later. And scientists emerge as significant figures. They're greater than artists, musicians, and poets. They provide service, value to society, where the artists, musicians, poets, and even historians are going to be seen as lesser than. Really kind of important as we kind of see that. I do hope that that makes sense to you. And that's going to lead us right to the evolution and natural selection. So this is another consequence of science. So as we see the consequences of that science, we've seen the idea of the scientific revolution. Now we're going to just kind of do a quick peek into the concept of 19th century evolution and natural selection. Really, who introduces this whole new scientific paradigm is going to be the father of sociology, Auguste Comte. Auguste Comte develops this idea of positivism. This is a really secular element. It connects us to the idea of leaving the religious world behind. In the 1830s, he published a book called The Course of Positive Philosophy. And as he's witnessing these industrial changes in the development of utopianism, he begins to think about what does the future look like? What does progress? And he argued that with this beginning of this age of rejecting religion and mythical traditions, as we're leaving behind romanticism, as we're leaving behind religion, as we're leaving behind reactionary policies, we're going to be able to transition into never-ending progress, or the positive stage. I like this graphic. These are what he would consider the three stages. Yes, Condorcet wrote something like this 50 years earlier, but his was much more complicated with 10 different stages. But we see he argued that the first stage, the theological stage, this is the stage in which all scientific ideas are allotted to God. Why does the sun rise? Apollo pulls it across the sky. Oh, okay, and then you move forward. The metaphysical age is more like the beginning of the scientific revolution. The universe is becoming more knowable, such as the heliocentric theory, but there's still a limited understanding because of technology. And we're still going to have a religion. When I think of metaphysical, this type of concept, I think of Descartes, where Descartes believed there's two spheres, right? A physical sphere and a mind sphere. And they're different, right? That's metaphysical. That there are some things we just can't understand. Now, as we enter this final stage, according to Kant, we're beginning to realize everything in the universe is material. Everything in the universe is understandable and knowable. And with that, we're able to transition. In some ways, I just see almost like we're chained, we're breaking the chains, we're getting into the light, getting into the truth. And with this idea of positivism, it becomes the foundation for really evolution, because only through positivism can we have scientists think independent of religion. And with the early developments, we begin to see Charles Lyell's uniformitarianism. This is the idea that the plate tectonics is the continental drift, the idea of how things are formed. Today, it's really accepted as scientific truth, but really this idea that the earth wasn't created in 7 days. It really challenged the biblical view. And then we see Lamarck's early works on evolution. His ideas are a little bit silly. What he introduced was almost like a kind of a common sense approach to evolution. He pontificated the idea that originally there were short-necked giraffes, but what they would do is they're stretching and stretching and stretching to try to get whatever fruit they were trying to. They would actually physically change their nature so that through their own efforts, they were able to be evolved, which in today's world we know is not true. That this is not the way natural selection occurs, at least theoretically. But by the 1850s, a new secular progressive environment really has developed, allowing Charles Darwin to delve into biological evolution. So before I go to Charles Darwin, I want you, if you don't understand how I connect it, so Comte's positivism creates this a-religious worldview, allows for scientists to delve into the idea freed from biblical concepts. Almost, they're saying objective. If you're a religious person, you might say it's more subjective, but that's up to you. But then we see Lyell and Lamarck's kind of maneuverings. They're thinking about what happened. How has the world evolved? How has animals evolved? What does this look like? And then that ushers in a moment that changes pretty much everything. Charles Darwin. He goes up he travels on the HMS Beagle. He goes all the way to the Galapagos. I like this map here because I think sometimes we forget the Galapagos. We see the Galapagos are really close to Ecuador, Latin America. That's going to be important. Does everybody see that? Everybody see it? It's like over here. Very, very close. We see the different islands. Really cool here. But as he gets there, he's there because the Galapagos Islands were untouched by humans, basically. And so it's almost like the original habitat. And he gained all these conclusions. And his most famous conclusions come from the finches. Finches, because the Galapagos, if you go back to uniformitarianism, originally was part of South America. And it's broken off centuries ago. So they have common animals, but those common animals look different. So why? Why are they finches? Why do they have different beaks? Well, this is where he developed this idea of natural selection. Where the nuts are hard and you can't get into them, they need a stronger beak, and so therefore through natural selection, not because of their force, but because of the changes that occur between or that occur, it allowed them to evolve. So the same species evolved differently because of their environment. Their environment determined which parts of became successful. So if you had the wrong beak, when you were born with the wrong beak, you would ultimately die. And when you died out, there was no longer a chance for you to reproduce. So the ones that had the better beaks for that climate were able to be successful. He published his works on the origins of the species of the means of natural selection. I screwed that one up, but you got that in 1859. I've always been told through some scientific historians that this book, interesting, drew attention, but it wasn't as mind-boggling as the next book. So, On the Origins of Species is really just his observations of what he did at the Galapagos. What he does 12 years later is what really challenged the Christian world. In his publication of The Descent of Man, which you see here, it's 2 volumes, in 1871, he placed man in the center of the animal kingdom. He argued that humans are just animals, nothing special about them in the sense of that God has not ordained them. They're not separate. They're part of the animal kingdom that had evolved. This really shocked the religious world. The religious world really challenged. And we're going to begin to see how Protestantism becomes associated. Protestantism is going to be associated with anti-intellectualism. And we even see that even in today's world in the 21st century, as we begin to see how evangelicalism has really tied into things like the anti-climate change theory. Really kind of important. No shade that this is just a statement, the idea of what that looks like. But with that said, Charles Darwin really reflects the triumph of science as he's able to use positivism, a paradigm freed from religious constructs, to draw scientific conclusions. And the theory of evolution, true or not, totally up for you to argue in your biology class. But what it does do is created a new argument that really created a binary, religion versus science. And that's going to lead us right to the development of sociology. But I'm going to pause here.